So first off, thank you everybody for joining. Thanks to the panelists, the attendees that are here and kind of trickling in. Today we are going to be talking about best practices for scaling your RevOps team from startup all the way to IPO, and obviously there is a lot that goes in between there. And so we've got a great crew on the panel today that has firsthand experience in this topic, and so excited to kind of get them involved. And I'm going to go kind of around the horn and do some introductions here. So first off, my name is Matthew Valm, CEO, co-founder of RevOps Co-op. We have a community of 8,000 plus RevOps folks from across the globe who are passionate about revenue operations. If you're not a part of our community, it's free to join. We'd love to have you participate. And with me, I'm going to be moderating the panel today. So with me, I've got a crew of experts with a lot more kind of knowledge and intelligence on this specific topic than me. And so first off, I want to introduce Prakash, who is the co-founder of Subscribe, which is a leading CPQ provider for SaaS companies. Before starting Subscribe, Prakash was on the business systems team at Okta, and so he has a lot of experience with growing kind of systems, technology, and RevOps as companies kind of enter hyper growth mode. And fun fact about Prakash is he's very much I'll say a beer connoisseur. I think it's over 1,000 beers, Prakash, that you've sampled. Previously, you even had a little notebook where you were kind of keeping track of all of those things. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your favorite is the Contains No Juice IPA by Alvarado Street. Is that right?
That's right, Matt. And the number keeps going up every week. So
yeah, that's great. Hopefully you're not seeing too big of a jump there week to week, but hey, no judgment there. So thank you, Prakash, for joining us, for being here. I also have Aisha here, who is a senior architect for go-to-market systems at Lacework. Obviously, as her title implies, a lot of experience in managing kind of tools and systems across growing companies, and a lot of kind of firsthand experience in doing that. So excited for some of the perspective that Aisha will be able to bring to the table here. And fun fact about her, she's been to what I think 32 different states, Aisha, with at least your for kind of traveling to your favorite national and kind of state parks. And I think you said Yosemite makes the top of your list. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Next on my list is Smoky Mountains for this summer.
There you go. Awesome. That's great. And last but certainly not least, I have Leslie, who is the VP of Accounting, Operations, and Finance Transformation at Okta. Obviously a hyper-growth company, lots of growth and lots of firsthand kind of experience that Leslie has in that space. And I love the variety and all these kind of fun facts that we got as well. And I'm kind of with you here as well, Leslie, but apparently Leslie cannot resist trying any new ice cream shop that she comes across, and she's indicated at least 10 out of 10 times she is always going to get a scoop, and it's always going to involve a waffle cone. I am always a +1 on the waffle cone bandwagon as well. So I love that. So thanks for being here, Leslie. And actually, maybe a quick question for you is, what's the most I'll say kind of outlandish or kind of crazy ice cream flavor that you've tried?
Yeah, I feel like I knew this question was going to come. I pretty much get mint chip always wherever it is that I go. So I stay to the basics, and I never get cake cones. Cake cones are blasphemous as far as I'm concerned.
No judgment here. I support all those things. Also a fan of mint chip. So all right, great. Well, thank you all for kind of entertaining us with some of those kind of introductions. And I'm going to pull up some slides here, and as I do, I guess the first thing that I want to jump into and really talk about is just the different RevOps team structures that folks can have across a variety of different kind of company types or org sizes, right? So, people on the people that are attending here today, all of us, I'm sure, right, we've worked at a variety of different different types, different sizes of companies, from very early stage kind of growth stage, startups, to kind of mid-market companies, and then all the way up to enterprise companies that are preparing to go public, companies that are kind of have gone public. And so, I guess the first thing I want to talk about is kind of just the different team structure and what the RevOps org can kind of look like at these different growth stages. And Prakash, maybe kind of start with you, because obviously you're in the process of building a company, right? You're in the RevOps space, but you're also in the process of building an early stage company. You've been at, I think, mid-market and enterprise companies before. So I'd love to hear your perspective first, maybe on just the different team structures that you've seen. And if we want to start, maybe left to right on like startup to mid-market to enterprise, like how do folks typically get started, right, with revenue operations? Tell us what that looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you'll hear some great perspective. We have our own experience, and our goal would be that you can take off some of these learning and apply in your organization. So to the question that Matt had, when the company starts, like the early days of the company, generally what happens, and this is what is happening at Subscribe today, as well as some of the other companies which are making like more on the revenue side, somewhere between 0 to 25, you start with a one ops person. And that ops person is probably doing everything with respect to, you call it as a RevOps or sales ops, or helping the sales team to close the deal, generating the document, running the approval workflow, probably helping on the pricing and packaging also. Addition to that, like more on the business side, it is also doing some of the system admin stuff. Like I'm sure that, okay, the very first person who joins any company, they are having some experience with the Salesforce admin. Like they can go and do stuff on the Salesforce or any other, or HubSpot or whatever the CRM you are using or ERP you are using or the tool you are using. So that is what it starts. And it just generally either one person, or you can see that a team of two people directly reporting either to the CEO if it is a very early phase, or if a little bit down the line, you will see probably on the CFO org. So that's how I have seen on the early days of the ops. When the company moves more onto the mid-market, you will see now the team is growing. There are some dedicated roles and responsibility for this ops. You may see an ops more on the go-to-market and ops on the finance side. Maybe the MarTech also come into the picture, like probably you can see someone on the marketing ops also, but it's still a person wearing more than one hat. It's still the business, it's still the ops is doing some of the system related stuff also. They are now either sitting on the CRO or whatever the GTM org you have, and then the finance ops is more on the finance or the CFO org. You also see that, okay, now companies start talking about like, okay, how exactly my deal desk function has to run, how exactly my RevOps, or companies start thinking about a pricing committee between these ops as well as the some of the leadership or the product team start getting involved into a lot of those operational part. And I say like the pricing and packaging, or even working with your legal firm on the contracting, that, okay, how exactly, what all different terms and conditions you want to put on the agreement, and a lot of those things. And there you see a dedicated skill set, or company look to hire people in that dedicated skill set. Now, I'll go to the slides, but would love to hear perspective from Leslie also. But when it goes to the enterprise, it gets into a lot more bigger ops team. Like, as we all have started seeing, the RevOps is more like a new function in the company and for all the good purpose. But then the RevOps, you can have a sales ops, you can have a deal desk, you can have a business ops. Different companies have a different naming convention, but each one of them are having a good sized team, and each one are having a very dedicated roles and responsibilities. And similarly on the finance, like you'll see the order management and some of the team doing like a more on the finance operation side. And then you have a dedicated system team by now. The ops team, the business ops team is not taking care of the system or the technology. And that's the right, I think that's definitely the right decision. Should be happen much earlier also. I think that, okay, as a mid-market, it's always good to have someone skilled in the technology when you are dealing with the system and technology. But yeah, I don't know if you have or Aisha, you want to add something.
Yeah. Sorry, Matt. The general theme of having generalists at the onset. So you have 1 to 2 people that are quarterbacking all across multiple process areas, right? Like when I think about RevOps and I think about sort of go-to-market and sort of this like pseudo trinity, if you will, it's kind of like, right, the go-to-market operations side, the finance side, and the systems side. At the beginning, you sort of have 1 to 2 people having that experience somewhat concentrated and quarterbacking a lot of the end-to-end quote to cash process, including part of like that deal structuring side. And so as you evolve, you create a lot more verticality in each of these respective areas, right? And really, right, it's like these numbers on the screen are just really, really rough guidelines. So much of this is going to be a direct function of the complexity of your business, the volume. Hopefully there's a note that they can't hear me. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But it is also going to be a function of the complexity and the volume that you're dealing with, right? So when we talk about a simple SaaS model versus a hybrid hardware software model, or if there are a lot of just goods that are being delivered, or a consumption model, all of that kind of changes depending on the nature of your business. And so it may not necessarily reflect the ARR amounts that we're showing here, but you really kind of have to evolve the team depending on the growth of your business and the trajectory of it.
Yep. And I know, one of the things that I kind of always say as well is that, revenue operations as a responsibility exists within every company on the face of the planet, right? Like someone at your company is going to have to do it, whether it's a named role or not. And, for me in the past, I joined a company called Ally.io, which is building OKR software, as the VP of business operations. And so I think I was like the 10th employee. And, that encompassed everything from finance to like legal to revenue operations, right? So like I was doing it all, right? I was the guy with the responsibility, even though RevOps wasn't in my job title. I think the information that Prakash has here, like definitely hits home for me, right? I was a 1-person team, reported directly to the CEO. I was responsible for systems admin. I also had an outside kind of consultant contractor helping me with that. We had things like manual order forms on Google Docs, maybe like 1 or 2 salespeople, 1 product that we were selling, right? So things were, I'll say like simple. And, the manual, kind of intervention or processes that we had in place supported that sort of model. And then you start to grow, right? And like Leslie said, there's no, like set kind of benchmark. Like we've laid out some dollar ranges here. But I think the one thing I've heard from Leslie, Aisha, Prakash, everyone in the past is, and Leslie, you said it before, is complexity. Like at some point, like that's going to be the tipping point of when you go from probably the stuff that you see in the startup bucket here to the mid-market bucket, right? You're going to start to see complexity in the way that you quote. You're going to have multiple products that you're trying to sell. You're now in multiple geographies. Maybe you've got multiple sales teams or multiple motions, right? You've got an outbound sales team, you've got a channel team, right? Like complexity is going to start to make its way into your company. And that's kind of the first tipping point, I guess. And yeah, Prakash, Leslie, Aisha, I don't know, kind of where you all have kind of specific experience on kind of going from that, like that tipping point for maybe like the startup early, kind of version of RevOps, like call it like RevOps version 1 to, RevOps version 2. But I guess does the complexity aspect kind of hit home? And maybe in your direct experience, like what were some of those things that were the first kind of catalyst or tipping point to have you move to that second iteration of your RevOps team?
I can add some perspective, start with that. So yes, absolutely. The complexity is, I would say, the core part of all this involvement. Like, even if you are selling to the same, and when we talk about the complexity, it is all about like the organic growth or the inorganic growth. You are maybe just having 2 salespeople selling your product. Probably everybody is well aware about every deal that company is doing. But that won't be the case when it becomes you have like the 15 or 20 or more sales rep. Then you need to have a process with respect to what's my discount approval process, what are the different terms and conditions. You want to put the guardrails that, okay, if somebody is doing a standard deal or something which is defined by the company policy, it should just get auto approved and all. So those are definitely the complexity. And I don't know, maybe we can move to the next slide, but the second slide has a lot of information on the tipping point, both with respect to, or maybe the next to this, Matt, is about the tipping point, both with respect to how the company grows just organically with the making more revenue in the same customer segment, or some of the inorganic growth could be an M&A, could be you are going geographically, you are launching a new product, or in this economy, you just want to launch a new packaging to go up market or down market, or however it is. And each one of those events, which adds to your business process complexity, triggers a different view of how you want to run your RevOps or the ops team across the company. So I would say that, yeah, the complexity is definitely the core part of that comes with the growth, as well as drives how the RevOps should be designed within the enterprise.
Yep. And yeah, and I know, and I guess Aisha, I'm curious on your take on this too, because at least for me, the thing I think that also resonated, the fact that it's it's the 30th of March, right? So tomorrow's the last day of the calendar quarter. Throwing out my thoughts and good vibes to any deal desk person out there who's going to be just completely inundated. Because that was me back when I was in RevOps, and you can imagine, we've obviously got tons of CPQ experts here on the panel. Things like manual order forms and things like that. Once you start to add up, again, multiple salespeople, multiple sales teams, a lot of those manual things that you're doing, like you're just going to be completely inundated with with requests by the end, on the last day, the second last day of the quarter. Those are all, again, to go back to Prakash's points, like those are some telltale signs that that you're ready for a change. You're ready to quote unquote graduate to maybe the next iteration. But Aisha, you have tons of experience on like the business systems and the go-to-market systems side. And so like we've laid out some of the technology stuff here, and any kind of thoughts or kind of opinions on kind of the startup to mid-market kind of graduation, the things that you consider there on the technology or the business system side?
Definitely. So once you hear your customers or end users, which is sales teams, complaining about seeing a lot of errors in the system and large quote creation times, large deal closing times, that is when system comes in play. And that is, I think, one major red flag that there is something in your system which is not configured correctly. You need more automation, you need more like tech debt cleanup, because of which the users are seeing unnecessary errors. So I think definitely deal volume, deal sizes, and deal closing times that are outcome of how your system is performing. So that can tell you if the deal closing time is higher, that means there's something that can be achieved via system automation or integrations.
Yeah. And Leslie, how does this kind of at least like on the go-to-market RevOps side kind of correspond and kind of overlap with some of the stuff on like for you, right, finance, accounting, operations? Like where's the like what are some of the things there that could be call it, I don't know, like hidden but critically important considerations on the RevOps side?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where there's not just one tipping point, right? It's like if we think about it from a people, process, and policy perspective, there are individual tipping points for each of those things, right? So like manual order forms that you just called out, and also, yeah, shout out to all the deal desk and OM people that were today, tomorrow is going to be quarter end. Depending on how all of that's evolving, right? When we think about, there's some point of critical mass, if you will, when we think about our manual processes, and to the extent that those manual processes accumulate that actually tangibly, visibly impede your ability for growth, that's when you're generally in trouble. From a people perspective, it's going to be, in the beginning, you may be hiring generalists. And so as you create more expertise, or as your business gets more complex, those folks that got you to a certain point may not be those individuals that you need to sort of take you to your next phase of growth. So there's going to be a people tipping point based on knowledge and expertise. Process and policy follow similarly. right? So depending on as your model evolves, as you think through not only the model itself, if you move towards something like consumption, your existing Excel quoting and your tracking based on, again, more Excel spreadsheets, if billing is supposed to be contingent on that consumption or going surpass a minimum volume, for example, that Excel spreadsheet is not going to work. So that there's that process tipping point, right? Et cetera, and so on. But we think about from like a finance perspective, so much of, and a lot of hopefully maybe folks on this call and resonates, when you get to that point pre-IPOs, you have to think really about compliance and really think about, your core financial control assertions around completeness, existence, accuracy, valuation, obligations, presentation. As you think about your processes and having to fulfill each of those assertions, you really have to critically look at the systems as well and those policies to the extent that they can or cannot uphold those things. So yeah, I mean, there are just a ton of little indicators as you go along, which may be indicative of needing to move on to that next point of your maturity cycle. But there isn't any one thing, right? It really takes a coalescing of multiple leaders to recognize, hey, like something's happening here, where we're really going to have to fundamentally revisit how we're doing something to then move to that next phase of growth.
Yep. And that's a good kind of segue, I think, into talking more on like the movement from mid-market to enterprise. But I know, at least like as I look at the ways that RevOps technology evolves, again, you brought it up, a lot of things at the beginning, right? You're going to have the core system of like your CRM, some sort of like, ERP platform, and then a lot of Excel, a lot of Google Sheets that are going to help you do a lot of things, right? And I think you phrased it perfectly, Leslie, we talked before about the complexity aspect, but specifically, I think complexity that impedes your ability to grow. That's going to be like, when that starts to happen across probably a variety of areas, that's going to be probably the thing that tells you, all right, we've got to graduate from RevOps V1 to RevOps V2. And if you look at the mid-market bucket here, I think that's where you start to have things like a CPQ tool. You start to have things from like a sales, commissions, software product. You're doing more around forecasting, reporting, customer health. You're leveraging marketing technology, right? For all the reasons we talked about before, even if we just take like CPQ as an example, since we got some experts like here on that, right? Manual order forms to that need to get processed, sent out via DocuSign, reviewed. I remember living in that hell the last like 2 days of every single quarter of like, some reps also trying to be like sneaky and getting stuff pushed through that might be non-standard and like other normal standard stuff, taking too much time to review, getting logged. Me just hoping that I can get through all of this stuff before the quarter actually is over and I can get all these things signed, because otherwise that's going to be on me if they don't. Right. If you can automate a bunch of those standard things and just have the normal workflows and things that you need to call out the non-standard items, that can be a huge value add. So let's say we're there, right? All right, cool. I've graduated from, early stage to now mid-market, right? I've got some of this, helpful technology, kind of in place. Let's talk about going from mid-market to enterprise. Leslie, you brought up a lot of the, kind of the pre-IPO kind of considerations that, are around, you spit off that list of like 6 or 7 things. And Prakash, I know you've got some experience here too. So maybe Prakash, if we start there, if you look at moving from mid-market up to the enterprise bucket, like what are some of those, start with the problems again, like what are some of those problems that you might start running into? For example, you've got a CPQ solution already. So can my CPQ tool scale? And then same thing, I know Leslie brought up, things outside of technology like people and process. Is it a scaling issue? What else besides scaling is in there for folks to consider?
Yeah, so I'll put that as a 2 aspect, mainly from a technology or the system side. One is once you start growing mid-market to enterprise, your business needs become much more complex. You are maybe selling to the enterprise, you are maybe selling to the global 1,000, as well as you might be selling to a company making like in a mid-market with a 500 or 1,000 people or so. And that sales motion, that's your pricing and packaging, your product offering, that may be very different. So if you're using a CPQ system, which does not support all of these pricing and packaging model, or Leslie mentioned a few times about the consumption-based versus where there is a sales assistant, or marketplace, or you are selling through partner or reseller. I was talking to one of the companies just earlier this week about the MSP related business. Those are the actual business or the business need or the business complex need, which your system will start failing or start becoming a blocker for you to go and capture those market or enable the sales channel in that. The other aspect is you may have the CPQ or things working, or you may have the other system working, but probably it is not connected to each other. You are transferring the data manually from one system to other, or there is some sort of automation or like a minimal automation. And that is another factor on the scale. If you're not running as an automation, once you start becoming enterprise, once you're running at a high scale, there is an audit or quarter end or month end that we have just spoke about, there will be huge volume to that. And you just cannot, just throwing people or just hiding the headcount will not help you to solve that problem. So the automation is another critical part, which I would say from a system side, which just the company needs to focus, and as well as just the how to think about like the system, what you have is capable enough just from a feature perspective, what the company will need 6 months, 1 year, 5 year down the line.
Yeah.
So
and yeah, and actually one, we talked a lot about, or we've been kind of talking about like tipping points for growth, technology. I guess I want to go back to this team structure slide a little bit too, and talk about kind of growing the team. At least, I know for me, going from like called startup to mid-market, again, I think we've heard a couple people say this, you start with kind of generalists, right? And then you start to kind of narrow in and hire more and more specialists in the right areas. And maybe, Leslie, curious on your take here, given all the background and experience you have at a company like Okta. But once you get to, I guess, call it that middle stage of what you call a mid-market type of company, I guess first question is like, what does a RevOps team kind of look like? And then two, how do you, kind of build or grow? Like, what is your RevOps structure? How does it evolve, I guess, as you kind of grow into the more kind of enterprise stage type of company?
Yeah, I mean, something that was alluded to earlier on is that RevOps, by definition, has taken on a whole slew of different interpretations by different companies. So first, let me define it for what it means at Okta, which may be different from some of the other folks on this call, which is at Okta, we define RevOps as order management, billing, collections, and provisioning. And then we also have a close partnership with our go-to-market operations team, which is where sales ops rolls into, as well as the deal strategy / deal desk team. And so for us at Okta, within the RevOps umbrella, as previously defined, the way that we thought about the growth was at the time, right, just really part of it was a function of some of the systems that we were using. And as that continued to evolve and become more and more complex, we sort of found folks that were experts within subscription management, within a specific tool set, so whether that's Salesforce CPQ, or if it's Subscribe, or if it's Zuora, really looked to that sort of general industry knowledge and expertise about the life cycle of a subscription, while also marrying that with some of the functional realities of how these quoting engines work within a SaaS model. And so at the point that we got to mid-market, that was really important for us to have that sort of knowledge and expertise, again, not only in the system itself, but also sort of that experience within SaaS and helping also guide and navigate our sales partners and our deal desk partners on how to best structure something in a way that not only optimizes for the customer and Okta, but also making sure our systems can handle it themselves, right? And really starting to take more of an end-to-end view and end-to-end view. And so as we brought on people, and again, this is part of that like people tipping point that I'm talking about in terms of knowledge and expertise. And ideally within that expertise is also experience with the end-to-end process, right? Because it doesn't just stop with the quote. It moves on to that sales order and how you operate within that, and billing and collections and RevRec. And so having some level of visibility and understanding about that end-to-end ripple effect was huge for us. And I would say, that was really particularly important as we went from mid-market to enterprise, and really having that end-to-end flow and understanding. One thing, without trying to get too off topic, that I do want to call out as you move from mid-market to enterprise, Prakash and Matt, you guys have emphasized complexity and needing to make sure that we can accommodate for that complexity as the business naturally grows. I think one counterpoint to that is going to be the importance of being able to automate scalable processes. And so much of that is also anchored on the idea of standardization. And so in some ways, it's also unwinding that complexity that you built in your rapid growth phase, right? Because earlier on, you're trying to accommodate as many scenarios as you can, whether that's your deal structure, your revenue structure, whatever it is. But as you get to that next phase, sometimes that stuff is just untenable. It may have been a boom on the business side, but really it just wreaked total havoc on the back end. And we're doing a lot of unnatural things from a process, policy, and system perspective. So that's one of the growth points that we went through, or pain points rather, was really trying to peel back the onion and really go back to basics sometimes with respect to, okay, let's talk about how we standardize our deals. So not only can we funnel it through the system in the right way, but it can bring us the right amount of predictability that we need for our finances. So I would say that's a bit of a counterpoint about trying to accommodate from complexity, but also with scale comes with standardization as well, which is reversing some of that complexity.
That's a honestly, here at Lacework, we are exactly in that situation right now. So at Lacework, RevOps basically means sales ops. They support sales teams. And there were 2 folks on the RevOps team as a startup, in the startup mode. And now we've moved to the mid-market area, now realizing that we want to focus more on enterprise customers and grow into enterprise area. So we have RevOps broken down into deal desk, sales ops, and then we have a separate order management team that falls under finance, and a separate revenue team that also again falls under finance. And also we are getting to a point where, like Leslie mentioned, peeling the onion, going back to basics. Right now, like the data in the system is so corrupted right now because of the way, because there were no guardrails in place. We just wanted to sell and grow. So right now it's just hard to, so our biggest goal right now is to understand our install base. And for that, we need to clean up our existing data and just go back to basics and put those guardrails in the system so that it doesn't get corrupted again.
It's a very nice, polite way to put it, Aisha. Data's corrupted. I like that. And I think a great point of what you all mentioned is, especially like as you're growing quickly, right? The normal kind of natural thing I think to do is just like go, right? Execute, execute. And as long as you can grow, get the deal, do whatever you need to generate revenue, right? You're doing things the right way. At some point, you actually need to, what you said, templatize your processes, document the things that you're doing, saying like, these are the ways that we do this thing, and then make sure that everyone starts to do things that way. That gets into the, I think kind of the people and the process stuff that you were mentioning, Leslie, which is critically important to, I think, to go from kind of up mid-market into kind of the enterprise bucket and to truly scale, right? Like tools and systems are great, but they're not going to magically make you like efficient or effective. As hard as it is to hear, like sometimes a good old fashioned like documentation of what your process is and making sure that you enforce kind of the processes that you have in place. Like we're all people, like that's truly super effective and something that we can't forget about.
I would say that, okay, what Leslie just mentioned, I think that should be probably one of the best or one of the critical takeaways here is, I have had a chance by now to speak to probably more than 200 companies, RevOps leader, and everyone in the software business, everyone selling in a very similar market segment, a little bit different pricing model or the packaging model. And everybody feels that, okay, their process is very unique in the business or has very complexity. And a lot of time the RevOps team or the system side, we just try to say that, okay, probably this is the uniqueness about our organization. But if you dig a little bit deeper, it is probably 90% thing is still a standard. And that is where having a standardization across is really important versus just keep defining a unique approach for individual organization. We all are selling to the same customer segment, very similar products, similar pricing and packaging. Cannot be 90% different. It should be 90% same and then 10% different where you go and vary between the companies.
Yep, agreed. And I guess one last kind of question, since I know we kind of talked about the the team structure a little bit here and growing. And I think, again, we took kind of the natural, progression of, getting more, call it specialized, kind of as we kind of scale and move up. I guess we haven't really talked about like scaling the technology or the tools, the systems that you have. And I guess, again, Prakash, maybe let's use CPQ as an example, since obviously you're building a CPQ company, but you have a lot of firsthand experience in kind of running a tool system like that. As you go, as you look at tools or systems, right, that you may have implemented in the mid-market segment, whether it's CPQ, sales commissions, anything like that, what are some of the, I guess, like those common challenges that come with kind of scaling those solutions as you move into the enterprise bucket? Like what are the things that you might be experiencing that tell you that, again, those tools, those systems that were working back in the, the mid-market days, the earlier days, are no longer kind of working or supporting me? And then I guess second question too is like, how can you maybe avoid that or get ahead of that a little bit? Like I know Leslie, you even mentioned, things on the like the audit, the control side, like all that stuff that may not seem important now because you just want to grow, right? But in a couple of years when you're at that kind of pre-IPO moment, like that stuff's going to be really important. So as you look at kind of scaling technology from mid-market to enterprise, Prakash, what are some of those kind of key considerations that you've seen, or problems, I guess, that you've seen, challenges of moving up market like that? And then two is like, what can people do, maybe early on to try to avoid some of those pitfalls down the road?
Absolutely. And I would love to hear Aisha's perspective, because she's like the GTM system architect and an amazing company. So what I have heard from a lot of RevOps, or what I have seen a lot of RevOps leader doing, is when they look for a solution, just pick the CPQ wise, a lot of companies or a lot of team looks at what is the need today. And based on that, they look for they do the evaluation and all. And CPQ is not something that the company look for 1, 2, or 3 years. It should be like with a much longer term. At the same time, you don't want to just go and boil the ocean and then think about everything that can happen in the company in the 10 year down the line. But trying to find or trying to think a little bit more from what you need right now versus what could be a need from 2, 3, 4 years, or just looking at another company which is ahead of you in the similar segment and where the company wants to become, and see that, okay, what might be the need for them, and then trying to do the assessment on that. So that's one thing I would say, that you should definitely look out more than the wider scope than what is the need today. The second aspect is, again, going back to the CPQ side, a lot of time we do the assessment just looking at what is the CPQ need, and what Leslie and Isa both mentioned about like the end-to-end perspective is absolutely critical. What happens on the CPQ side, or whatever happened on the go-to-market, does directly impact what happens on the finance side. And think about that, as a growing company or as any stage company, the finance is one of the most critical part. Like the CFOs, for anyone, the CEO or the CFOs, the revenue and all are the important metrics or the driver that they are running the company. So ignoring that is just not an option. So thinking through like the end-to-end within the company from a processes, what you do on the go-to-market, how exactly that translate to the end-to-end process on the finance side is absolutely critical. So I would highly, highly suggest that. 2 comments. One is look outside what you are just looking for right now and think about that, okay, what are the needs? And that is the problem. A lot of companies see that, okay, when they are mid-market, they go and pick a small tool which meets the need right now, but that it is no more adding any value, versus it is becoming a blocker. The system is becoming a blocker because system does not have those capability which business wants to go and have it. And we saw that at Okta also. We had to do a lot of system related change because whatever the decision we made couple of years back, that was that the requirement has changed, and then it is no more serving the need. And the second is the end-to-end impact versus just looking at the siloed function.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear like how you think from a system architecture side on the GTM.
I completely agree with the end-to-end thought process. It's very important because CPQ most of the time is going to be your central data system and all of the reporting, all of the finance metrics are going to be calculated off of your CPQ data. So having that connectivity and thinking about any solution end to end is very important. But also on the flip side, I think in today's time, especially when you are in the mid-market space, it's very easy to get carried away with all the CPQ functionalities, all the bells and whistles, and all the ability there to customize CPQ as you need it. But I would highly recommend like stick to out of box functionality as much as possible. Try avoiding customizations, because like it is easy to customize it, but then later it will impact your performance, and going back to how it was is going to be challenging. Like performance impacted a lot because of customizations. So try to simplify your processes. Again, I think more than tool, it's important to have simpler processes, and then use your tool for those processes. So define your process first, simplify your process, and then add customizations if needed in CPQ or any tools for that matter.
Yeah, and I think it, Isha, that ties back to what Prakash was saying before of like, we all may think we're unique or we have all this non-standard stuff kind of, that's going on at our companies, right? But the truth is we're much more alike than we are different. And so use the out of the box functionality when you can, because one, that probably aligns with the reality, which is the standard, way that your business operates. But then two, if you try to customize to go from say like the 90% up to the 100%, like that 10% of customization that you're going for, like the technical debt and upkeep and the things associated with that are going to way outweigh any of the value that you could potentially get upfront. And I'm guessing you've probably seen some of that happen firsthand.
Yes. You don't want to be in a situation where every 2 years you're thinking about a revamp.
Yep. And actually that's a good segue into kind of the last kind of bucket that I wanted to talk about. But actually, just to kind of summarize, I think the main thing that I heard from everyone here on moving kind of up market, and especially on the system side, are don't just look at where you're at today, right? Understand obviously what your needs are today, the things you need to solve for today, but understand the future needs that you're going to have as well, and try to make sure that any tool system that you deploy is going to be able to solve for both of those things. And then I think the other thing that really resonated with me as well is that, and I think it can get lost on us early on, especially when we're going from like startup to mid-market, is you also need to understand that mid-market to enterprise, anything you do is not just impacting, say, the go-to-market or the RevOps team anymore, right? You now have a lot of different stakeholders across a lot of different teams that you're going to have to kind of interact or engage with. Again, let's use CPQ as one particular example. It's not just the sales team that and the RevOps team anymore that you need to consider. It's the legal team. It's the finance team. There's a lot of other teams that are now going to be involved in that, right? And you're integrating with their tools, their systems, their processes. And so that's one of the other big considerations when you're in that kind of middle bucket, is understand that it's not just, call it, your own needs or requirements that need to be solved for. It's also those of others. And in order for you to be successful, those are going to need to be met as well. So in the last 10 minutes that we have here, one of the things I also want to talk about is just the current kind of economic climate that's out there, and how kind of this graduation of kind of moving up the the RevOps maturity curve, right, from startup to mid-market to enterprise, how that's impacted, maybe looks different now than it did, like a year or 2 years ago, especially when people are considering things like cost cutting, but they still want to grow, but now they want efficient growth, right? Prakash, maybe we'll kind of start with you, since I know you had some thoughts on that. How do you see RevOps teams as kind of navigating that kind of climate today? How can they help? What are some things they can do? What looks different now than maybe it did 12 months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody is talking about this nowadays. And I would say a lot of things that we spoke in the last 30, 40 minutes just looking at the same thing more from a cost perspective. We spoke about the automation. I would say that, okay, RevOps teams should definitely look for an opportunity to automation, because automation is going to help you to not to have only option as throwing the headcount to solve the problem. It is like, I would say, you will become a best friend of CFO if you can show them that you can still grow the revenue, or the company can grow without having the operational cost growing like the exactly with the same multiplier. And for that, automation is the most important part. The second one is, when I said about like the end-to-end or looking at the siloed system and all, the other aspect when you're doing the assessment, look for how much time it takes to realize the value of the platform. If you're buying a new product, I would say that, okay, you should absolutely look at that. If I sign the contract today, when exactly I start seeing the value of the product? No CFO in today's world is looking for, the day is gone that when you sign the contract, it takes 6 to 9 months for the implementation, and then you realize the value and say that, okay, that's fine. The shelf life has to be really, really like a weeks, not like a months or quarters or so. So those are the two aspects, like looking at from the automation, so that you don't think about like everything needs a headcount. And the second aspect is, if you are buying a product, look for how we can realize the value at the faster. So that should be like the one of the top criteria when you're asking any of your vendor.
I think consolidation also, Prakash. If one tool is giving you multiple abilities like an ERP and CPQ together, then you should consider consolidation, because that saves cost on your like customized integration and support.
Yeah.
And I would say, just to add on to that, beyond technology, it's also right where do a lot of companies spend most of their dollars? That's going to be on real estate, rent, as well as people and salaries. So thinking through global expansion and how to leverage more cost efficient markets, that's something that we're taking a look at Okta. At some point, especially in the hybrid remote world, you sort of have the opportunity to really explore headcount and great resources, great talent in lower cost areas. And so as going back to that theme of standardization and scaling back on some of the complexity, if you get to the point where you're able to stratify, for example, for us, we're able to stratify our deal population between those that are standard and those that are non-standard and complex. What we're trying to find, and you sort of hit that ideal ratio where the majority of your business should be standard, such that they're either able to flow through entirely in an automated way so that there's no one touching it at all, or alternatively, you sort of funnel those through your lower cost centers where, again, great talent, but also less cost, and it's handling the majority of your business as opposed to having everything onshore, San Francisco Bay Area, premium prices. So I'd say that's a big point as you think about global expansion. Software rationalization, they already called it out. People get really tied to software and there's like they build a really deep loyalty to it. But at some point, as that company evolves, I would not be surprised at all if today we're still paying for enterprise company-wide licenses, of which for a software product that only 1 or 2 teams are using today, like we need to sort of revisit and fundamentally take a look at that. And I think the last part of it is to the extent that your RevOps team can support expansion into channels in the partner ecosystem, right? There's a reason why we continue to invest in that, because it allows for a lower cost of sale. It allows you access to all these different customers that you wouldn't have had outside of this network. And so really being able to, as these new partnerships are being introduced, having that capacity to be able to try to think through how you can support that, right? A lot of new initiatives that are introduced, a lot of people can't see beyond the initial short-term pain, but then you have to keep an eye on the long-term gain here. And so I would say that's a big point of emphasis as well, is to enable your partner organization to continue to grow, because that is an area where you can really drive up your margins.
Yep. Prakash, were you going to add anything?
No, I do like what Leslie said about like we are in an ecosystem, and trying to tap all the different resources available in the ecosystem is definitely a need at this time. It's hard for a company to just in this economy that you just working as a standalone and doing all this stuff. So utilizing ecosystem is very important.
Yep. And that, and that all makes tons of sense. And I think, the main thing is we've seen from, we've talked through kind of the team structure and the growth across these various categories. We've talked about how the technology stack can grow across these various categories. And we've talked about some of these kind of tipping points for growth, right? The things that tell you that you're ready to go from kind of V1 to V2, V2 to V3. I think in today's climate, the thing that I've heard everyone say here already is, again, if you look not only across, not only with technology, like Aisha mentioned, right? Like, can we do multiple things with one particular solution instead of multiple solutions to do multiple things? But, Leslie just brought it up too, like, what else can you do with people or process or technology, right? To, drive more value, more ROI, right? Can you find, if your RevOps team needs a new Salesforce admin, right? Or if you need a new hire for a CPQ analyst, right? Whatever it might be. Again, a couple of years ago, might have said, okay, we're based in San Francisco, I'm going to look to find someone there. That's not the case now. How can you find high quality talent in other lower cost areas? And if that's part of your message to the CFO, to the finance office, like Leslie, I'm guessing you can attest to this, like, you'll become that person's best friend, right? Because if you start thinking about things through their lens, that's just going to build trust. That's going to build kind of faith in you and your team. And then guess whose projects are going to be higher on the priority list down the line, right? Yours. And so it shouldn't stop at technology for sure. I think, like Aisha mentioned, if you can accommodate multiple use cases or solve multiple problems with one particular tool, consolidating current solutions, point solutions that you have, tons of value there. And within RevOps, you're responsible for probably how many different tools and technologies, right? So that's a big one. The people side, again, look at how you can do the same thing, generate more ROI through a new hire, through consolidating responsibilities with certain people, right? That's all huge. And then on the process side, right? Document what you can, enforce your process, automate those things, and messaging that to your finance office, to your CFO, to make sure that they just know that you're thinking about it, right? That you're not just looking through the lens of your own problems, but you really have the business in mind for those things. That is going to get you very, very, very far. And so let's see, we've got kind of like 5 minutes left. I think, I know we've answered kind of some questions that we've gotten up until now, but I guess maybe I'll just go around the horn and just see if there's any kind of closing remarks, anything that y'all want to just mention to kind of the audience as we kind of wrap things up. And maybe Prakash, kind of start with you on this notion of, again, kind of scaling your team. Any last thoughts or opinions?
Yeah. I'll go back and just repeat, like, look for what you may or what your company might be looking for or needing in the next 2 to 5 years. That should be, and the best way to find that is which company you want to become in your segment. And if you can find that, you can go and see what all different things they are running and try to see what do you need to do the same thing if the business grow up tomorrow. So that should definitely. I would also say that, okay, we have a pretty good ebook published on our website. If you go to the subscribe.com, there is an ebook. I don't have a link here, but it's on the resources section that has all the code to revenue from probably 0 to 1 billion revenue growth wise. So that has a lot of great materials that folks should look at and see if that is useful.
Yeah. And Leslie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, I don't think any of us are necessarily trailblazing paths here, right? A lot of different companies have gone through these different growth stages. And so I think the employment and utilization of your network is important. Organizations like this are super important. I'm inadvertently doing a plug, but it's super important to reach out to your peers. As I think through how we navigated a lot of those tougher tipping points, as we've called them here at Okta, if I didn't have my network of folks reaching out to them, asking how they've done it, just to bounce ideas off, it's tremendous. Because as we've already called out, there is no one size fits all. Those numbers that we shared on the screen, it may not necessarily apply to you because of the complexity of your business and the growth trajectory that you guys are looking at. So I would emphasize just talking to your network, because a lot of people have gone through this and with great success. But again, it's not a one size fits all.
Yep. Agreed. And Aisha, what about you? Any last remarks?
I agree with the comment that Leslie made earlier. Invest in business systems team earlier, and invest in expertise like subject matter experts in CPQ. If you are implementing CPQ, invest in that, because that way it will make sure you will have a scalable solution up front, and you'll have a strong foundation rather than putting patches in place in the system.
Yep.
And the other thing is cross-functional collaboration. I think that's really, really important in an organization between RevOps or sales ops, business systems, and finance. They all should be aligned to one goal, that is company's goal towards revenue, rather than having different goals and going in different directions. It's better to be aligned and going in that one direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think the main things that kind of resonated with me from this chat are, again, think ahead. Like Prakash said, think about the company you want to be, not the company that you are. Ties back to a lot of what we've seen in the past of, again, the problems that you have today are not going to go away or not going to get better. They're only going to get worse if you don't solve them. So think about how you can solve them today and how you can solve those future problems that you might have as well. And then don't forget that there's, as your company grows, that you're no longer thinking about things just for you, the RevOps team, the go-to-market team. You now have multiple stakeholders, multiple teams involved. And so think outside of kind of just your current team structure and the impacts that people, process, technology have on them as well. Those are my two big takeaways. And so with that, I know we're basically at time. So Prakash, Leslie, Aisha, I want to thank you all very much for participating, for dropping some knowledge on kind of all of us today. This was great. For everyone who kind of registered and attended, thank you as well for joining us. The subscribe crew will be following up after this with some assets information and some other kind of good stuff for you. And then again, you can continue this conversation with any of us in the Slack group for RevOps Co-op, or hit any of us up on LinkedIn as well. You can find us all out there. And with that, I will let you all run. Again, thank you for participating, and I'll see you all on the flip side. So take care.
Thanks, everyone.